Hey everybody, James from OnType here, and today we're talking about the four sides of the mind. In this video, we're just going to go over some of the basics, how the four sides work, and what they are. Alright, so let's dive into it. So what are the four sides of the mind? The four sides of the mind make up the different perspectives that we have in our mind, and there are four main sides of them. So our 8 functions are viewed in different ways depending on their location. You have the hero function all the way to the demon function, and depending on the order of your functions, they will be viewed differently. So the different sides of the mind just help us look at problems in different ways. Let's say your ego sees a problem one certain way, your subconscious may look at it from a different perspective, your shadow another one, and your superego a complete opposite perspective. So the different sides of the mind really just help us look at things differently. They help us see things from opposing viewpoints, and they help us address the world in different ways. So if one perspective doesn't work, we can try a different method. If using your ego doesn't work, you can use your subconscious. If that doesn't work, you can use your shadow. And if that doesn't work, you can use your superego. So these 4 different orders of perspective really just help us address the world in different ways. So yeah, the superego, it exists to protect the other 3 sides of the mind. So the superego, as we'll get into in more detail later, really exists more to protect the other 3 sides of the mind than it is something that's consistently and often used in a person. So for the 4 sides of the mind, first we have the ego. So the ego just makes up your first 4 functions. So if you know your 8 cognitive functions, your first 4, that's your ego. And that's basically kind of the way you address the world most of the time. That's how you look at most things. That's how you talk to people. That's how you solve problems. That's how you address projects. So you're mainly using your ego in your life. I would say on average, probably 70% of your daily life will be using your ego functions in that order. And then you have your subconscious. These are still your first 4 functions, but they're in opposing order. So it's when you use your own functions, but you use them in a different way, from a different perspective, and it helps you use your functions in a more versatile way, especially your first 4. So your ego may try to solve a problem with your first 4 functions. It may fail. You can look at it from kind of an opposing viewpoint with the same functions, and that's kind of what your subconscious does. And then we have your shadow, which is your last or final 4 functions. So out of your 8 functions, your first 4 are your ego and your subconscious, and then your shadow has the last 4. And within the shadow are your functions you use less, use with more pessimism. They're not as optimistic, but there's still functions in your mind, and you might only use them, 10, 15, 20% of the day. But they're still there, they're still being used on a daily basis. And then you have your superego, which is those final 4 functions just flipped around in opposing order, just like the subconscious does to the ego, the superego does to the shadow. And so if you're using your shadow to solve a problem and that even doesn't work, then you can look at it from a completely opposite, different perspective. So we're just going to go over kind of an example of this. So here we have an INFP's 4 sides of the mind. We have their ego, which has their introverted feeling first, extroverted intuition second, introverted sensing third, and extroverted thinking fourth. And that's their ego. That order of their functions is how they address the world most of the time. If that isn't working out for them, or they want to address a problem differently, they can use their subconscious through that 4th function. And it starts with the 4th, and then the second is what the ego's third is. The 3rd subconscious function is the ego's 2nd function, and the 4th subconscious function is the ego's 1st. So it does get a little complicated here, but really it's just the ego's functions in different order, in the opposing order. So let's say an INFP is leading with their feeling. They're going, I know how I feel in this situation. It's not really helping me out. I know how I feel. I know I feel bad about this, but I still can't quite understand how to solve this problem. They might go with their subconscious and look at what other people think. So they go, I feel this way about this, but I don't know if it's true, so I'm going to do a bunch of research. I'm going to ask people what they think, and they can tell me whether my feelings are rational or not. And so that would be using their subconscious to solve the problem more than just their ego. So it's kind of a different perspective on their functions, but still can be a very healthy way of figuring out problems. And then we have the shadow, which has extroverted feeling, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, and introverted thinking. So it's the 4 functions that aren't in the ego. They're different functions, and in that order, in the shadow order, they can be used to solve problems. Maybe with a nemesis function, they may be worried about hurting someone's feelings, so they go out of their way to make them feel better. But let's say that doesn't work, and even trying to make another person feel better isn't solving the problem. They may use their superego, which is their shadow functions in opposing order. And their superego with introverted thinking demon, if it's being used in a healthy way, can end up being honest and telling the truth to others, and that may end up making them feel better overall. So a problem can be solved with any four sides of this mind. It just depends on the person's development, how it will express itself and how it will come out. So how are these four sides of the mind commonly expressed? So we can go over some of the ways that these sides are normally used in a person's daily life. The ego is normally expressed in a pretty positive, optimistic way. It's happy being the leader. It's happy to be the first way we solve problems, using our hero and child especially in kind of a loop. It can really just enjoy looking at the world that way and be pretty happy in that comfort zone of using its hero and child to deal with most of their life. It's kind of a person's ideal method. It goes, if I can solve problems this way, I'm already pretty optimistic about it. I'm already thinking about these functions. Great, I'm going to do that. So that's often used. Ego is often used. How about the subconscious? It's the ego functions, so still pretty positive functions, but it's in an opposing order. Subconscious, often it's happy being praised without having to put in too much effort. A lot of the time the subconscious doesn't want to go through the work of developing the ego functions in a different order, and it's really happy to be praised for its functions without having to do too much. More immature person might use a lot of pride and arrogance to kind of protect the fact that they may not be developing the functions in this type of order as much as they are in the ego order. They may focus on their ego prioritization and functions without thinking too much about seeing it from a different perspective like the subconscious does. And when people do this, they can often be kind of insecure about it. They might realize deep down they're not as good as they may want to be or imagine themselves in their head. And they can often guard this with a lot of pride and showboating. So often the subconscious is happy being used every once in a while, but really it wants to be enabled more than anything. It wants to say it's good at it without having to be or not having to be. It doesn't want to be judged. It just wants to be accepted as good without having to put too much effort. Whereas the ego, it'll be happy to put the effort in, and it doesn't even need as much praise because it knows it puts the effort in and it knows it's good at it. It goes, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. I don't need to be praised too much. I know that I do this. Whereas the subconscious is more, okay, I don't always look at it from this order, but I want to be thought of as if I do. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety that goes into looking at things from a different perspective than the ego. And if someone doesn't put a lot of effort into that, they may come at it with an insecure disposition that is often overcompensated with pride. So how about the shadow? The shadow is really happy doing the bare minimum as well, if not ignored entirely. A lot of people will be very happy ignoring their shadow functions, not wanting to use them too much. It's really pessimistic. It's a lot of critical thinking they have to do about themselves and about their flaws and about mistakes and about, things that they're not as good at, and it's just not as fun. People would rather, it's kind of similar to the subconscious. They'd rather be praised without having to put an effort, but really they don't need as much praise or really enjoy it as much. Really, they just want to be either met or ignored. They don't want to have too much thought put into the shadow. But a very healthy shadow development will be focused on and will be thought about a lot. But most people on a daily basis would rather ignore their shadow entirely. And kind of similar with the superego. The superego really only comes out for most people when really bitter, really upset, when the shadow's even failing to solve a problem, and it comes out in the last order. If the ego, the subconscious, and the shadow don't get what they want, their needs aren't being met, the superego may come out and, explosion of rage. They may abandon the other person. They may abandon the situation. They may, fight back. It really depends on the situation. It can often be in a self-harming way, but the superego comes out when it feels like it's expended all of its sides of its mind, all of its viewpoints, and none of them worked. The superego goes, hey, you haven't tried me. I'm a completely new one. And the superego has the complete opposite function order as the ego. It's basically the polar opposite. And it comes out when the ego and its two different methods have completely failed, or when they aren't getting satisfied in the way they think they should be. And it can come out and it can be really upset. And it's often protecting the subconscious, especially because a person's core is their subconscious. It's kind of what they fear, but what they enjoy. It's where their confidence can come from, so they're kind of more insecure. Their ego and their top two functions aren't as insecure if they aren't being met perfectly, but those third and fourth functions, especially leading into that subconscious, really need to be met. So if they're not, that superego can be very protective of those kind of more infantile functions, and it can definitely come out to protect them. So I'll go over some analogies for how to think of the four sides of the mind when it comes to your own brain. And these will be a little abstract, but let me know if this kind of makes sense to you. So the four sides of the mind are kind of like four cities within a country or an area. The ego is the capital city. It's where all the resources go. It's the nicest area for the most part. It has a big population. It's where the economy is. It's kind of the center. It's the biggest city in this country. The shadow would be more of a poorer area where people maybe don't go as much, but there might be a lot of older people, there might be a lot of culture, something to be learned there, but it's often ignored in favor of the bright lights of the ego. And the subconscious would be a more hip, rich, popular area with younger people. It's kind of this new and growing thing that people kind of enjoy paying attention to more, but it might not have some of the culture and tradition of the shadow area. So the subconscious is kind of a nicer area, but not quite as large maybe as the ego, but still a pretty nice area. And then the superego would be like a military city, a military area where there's weapons, and it's used to defend the country or to destroy other countries, take over other countries. It can be used in many different ways. It might destroy its own country. So if the military area or the military city doesn't think that the other sides of the mind are paying enough attention to them, it could take over because it's got all the weaponry. So having a healthy balance between these different areas of your mental country is really important. You can't just put all your resources in the ego and forget about the other sides. You have to build up all of these sides. You have to build the subconscious up with some better structure. You have to build a shadow up with some attention being paid to it and fix it up. You have to make sure that your superego is happy and well taken care of so they don't revolt. So it's really important to kind of keep a good balance between all of the sides of your mind. So now that we've looked at it from a kingdom perspective, let's look at it more from like a royal family perspective. The hero or the ego would be kind of the king, and the king, the kind of top of the pile, gets its advice from the parent function, who's more of the advisor. So that's kind of how your top two functions are working in this the king and the advisor way of your kingdom in your mind. The parent often makes the hero more responsible. It gives them good advice. It makes sure that the hero's not just trying to do everything at once. It's trying to make sure that it's measured and balanced. Whereas the subconscious, the aspirational kind of side of your mind, would be kind of the heir to the throne. They might be younger, less mature, more optimistic, but they're generally given a positive viewpoint because they're going to become a bigger part of the kingdom one day. And for most people, they want their subconscious to be a bigger part of the kingdom than they may even put effort into. So that subconscious side, that kind of person in this role may be arrogant. They may get their advice from their child function. It's a more optimistic viewpoint, potentially more prideful, more kind of looking towards what is possible versus being as wise as maybe an older member. And the shadow would be that older member, that more somebody who's been in power before, somebody who understands how everything works and understands the game. They may not get the attention of the ego and then the prince, so to say, of the subconscious, but they know what's going on. They're very intelligent. They have a lot of wisdom, but they can be foolish as well. They could be more of a senile perspective, depending on your own maturity of your sides of your mind. And the superego is often the kind of the forgotten family member who may get advice from the trickster or the traitor function in its superego role, and they're more of an outsider of the family, and they might have a position of more like, I want to take over the family, I want to dethrone the king myself. So think of like kind of the Lion King with Scar, who wants to dethrone the king, Simba as the subconscious, the aspirational. Kind of think of it in that way, where Scar is looking to overthrow, and he's kind of represents the superego of the kingdom. And only when properly taking care of the four sides of your mind will your superego be more at ease, when it's being given the attention, when you're not ignoring your shadow, you're not ignoring wisdom, you're not over-focusing on optimism and arrogance, and you're being properly humble and loving to yourself and to others. That's where you won't have to deal with this worry about your own mind battling itself. And so another kind of type of analogy is you can think of it like a sports team. The ego is the star player, they get all the attention, they're very good, they've been doing it for a little while. Subconscious may be the new and upcoming player everyone's excited about. They have maybe a better potential even than the star player, but they're new and kind of unproven. We don't know if they're tried and tested the same way that the star player of the ego is. And you have the shadow, maybe kind of an older player, has some wisdom, they're a veteran, they've been doing it a long time, but they might not get the attention and the respect they deserve for how much time they've put in and how much wisdom they can have. And you have kind of the superego, which may be an underappreciated player. It may be a player who doesn't get any attention, and that can make them very bitter and resentful to the entire team. So you want to make sure your team is working well, that the star player is listening to the older player, that the star player is teaching the subconscious, that the shadow is teaching the subconscious as well, the older player teaching the younger player, and that you're appreciating your superego and you're not ignoring that perspective entirely. So I hope this explains a little bit about how the 4 sides of the mind work, and if you guys are interested in more intricacies of the different 4 sides of the mind, let me know in the comments below, and subscribe down below as well, and I hope you have a great day.